Now, a very useful model, if we're talking about culture, is the ideas of a guy called Charles Handy. And Charles Handy, this is the sort of thing that you'll get in the exam. This would very much suit a scenario question. Here is a situation, what kind of culture is it? Right, power cultures then. A power culture basically means that there is a boss who tells everybody else what to do. The boss has the power. Do this because I'm the boss. You might remember from the last chapter, entrepreneurial structures, where there's a boss and a team. A power structure, one person makes all the decisions. It's got exactly the same advantages and disadvantages that we saw earlier. It's quick. The trouble is that the people working for the boss just get used to doing what they're told. They can't think for themselves if the boss isn't there. A role culture. A role culture is where there's lots of rules and procedures. Imagine that you work for a bank and your job is when somebody applies for a credit card, you have to decide, do they get a credit card and how much credit do they get? Now, that ought to have lots of procedures that you follow. You check this, you check that, you calculate this, you do that, so that whoever actually processes this application, it shouldn't make any difference. If I send my credit card application 5 times to the same bank, I should get the same answer 5 times. Everybody should say, no, you don't get a credit card. Or they should also, yes, you get a credit card and your credit limit is $1,500. I should get exactly the same answer each time. If that's what we have, we will have a role culture. The whole idea behind a role culture is it makes no difference who does the job. The outcome will be the same. Now, that's great if you want to be consistent. That's great if you want a standardised product and service. The trouble is, it's very inflexible. Task cultures, on the other hand, do what's needed. Do whatever you feel is best to solve this customer's problem. They are, in a way, the complete opposite of a role culture. Task cultures are very, very, very flexible, which is great. We can do what helps the customer. The trouble is they're very, very inconsistent. I go to 3 different people and I get 3 different answers. I've come to you and you're telling me this, but your colleague told me that yesterday. You're telling me something different. So in the exam, there is no correct answer. They've all got different strengths. Now, in real life, you don't get any of these 4, but you get variations on them. They'll be close to something. And the key thing is, although none of them are right, one of them might be the most appropriate one. So in a bank, a role culture is the most appropriate one. For a lecturer, a task culture is probably the most appropriate one. Now, the bottom one there, a person culture, is where, in effect, it's not really about a company at all. It's about lots of individuals who all happen to work in the same place. So, for example, I've got a doctor's surgery down there. All the doctors, in effect, operate on their own. They all do their own thing, seeing their own patients. All they do is share an office. The same could be true of people who perhaps sell real estate, estate agents, as we call them in the UK. They perhaps share an office, but apart from that, they pretty much get on and do their own thing. Person cultures are probably the least common out of all of them. So you just need to know those 4, what to look for in the exam, lots of rules, procedures, or people doing what they want, and what's good about them. That one suits multiple choice questions because there's 4 possibilities, and in most multiple choice questions there's 4 possible answers. Final one we've got there about culture is by a guy called Hofstede. And Hofstede simply says that you will get different cultures in different countries because of the way that people act. Now, what this means is that companies that are based in certain countries behave differently. An American company behaves differently to a Japanese company, which behaves differently to a British company, because culturally Japan, America and Britain are different. Now, he doesn't say that any of these cultures are good or bad. He simply says they are different for various reasons. So, for example, in America, it's very much based around individuals. So, I want to do this. Japan is much more collective. So the idea is that in Japan, most companies are much more used to operating as a team. In the UK and in the States, they're much more based around individuals doing something. Now, the kind of times when you have difficulties then is if you have a Japanese group of workers trying to work with an American group. So maybe there's been an acquisition or whatever reason, they won't work very well together because they both expect to do things in different ways. Power distance. Does the worker simply accept what the boss tells them, or do they question it? Now again, different countries tend to have different attitudes towards that. So again, that would make a difference if you put workers from different countries together. Masculinity versus femininity has got nothing to do with men and women. What it's talking about there is we're talking about the masculine approach, which again is very much, I'm the boss, I'm only interested in getting the work done. That's very much like, if you remember, when we talked about White and Lewin, we talked about task-focused managers. Femininity is more to do with country club managers. So in other words, a masculine manager says, get the work done, that's the end of it. Feminine managers, again, be they male or female, doesn't make any difference, are worried about, is the worker happy? Is the worker enjoying their job? Have they got job enrichment? Have they got interesting tasks? Do they feel motivated? It's worrying about the wider personality. The masculine approach is, I'm the boss, you're the worker, there's the work, get on and do it. It's just different. And again, you get these in different countries. Hofstede says that Scandinavian countries, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, are well known for the fact that they look at the entire personality of a person, not just getting the work done. So they've got more feminine traits. Uncertainty avoidance. Do people like to be left on their own or not? Uncertainty avoidance, tell me exactly what you want me to do and I will do it. As soon as I've done it, I'll come back to you so you can tell me what to do next. Uncertainty, if you're happy to do that, tell me what task you want and let me go away and worry about how to do it. I'll see you when I'm done. So again, different countries tend to have different kinds of personalities. So again, the Japanese model is very much uncertainty avoidance. Tell people what to do and then they'll let you know how they're getting on. Again, not that Hofstede is saying anything's wrong, it's just different. And finally, time orientation. Do we think of short term or do we think long term? The UK is criticised often for having a very short time orientation. Managers make decisions for a year at the most, maybe 6 months. China, until recently, has been well known for thinking 20, 30, 40 years ahead. So again, nothing wrong with either, they're just different. The key thing that Hofstede is interested in is what happens if you try and expand internationally. If there is an acquisition, you have one group of workers in one country who are used to one way of doing things, and you now try and do a different way, you're going to have problems. The other thing there is, what about your customers? Your customers might be interested in a certain thing, and you are going to do things in a different way, and again, you're going to have problems. So, culture is actually a very interesting topic to think about in the companies that you come across, whether it's somewhere you work, somewhere you deal with as a customer, somewhere you deal with as a supplier, however it is. But think about what kind of culture they've got, because if people don't fit in with the culture, then there will be difficulties. Where maybe the culture needs to be changed. So maybe we've got a task culture which needs to be changed to a role culture. Customers are complaining we're inconsistent. Role cultures are more standardised. So maybe that's what we need to do. So in the exam, culture tends to come up, not all the time, but it's a relatively frequent question because it's talking about people. Particularly Charles Handy. That one will probably be more frequent than the other ones because, as I say, 4 different types of culture, 4 different possible answers. That one comes up a lot. So, structure and culture, in effect, are 2 sides of the same thing. The structure is the bit you can see on a bit of paper. I can see who does the work. I can see who's the boss. I can see who they report to. But the culture is the way that they do it. Are there lots of rules? Or are you just left to get on and do what you want? So the 2 of them, very important together.